Hello, my name is Léo Sperandio, and this is my sketchbook tour, which is me going through basically all of my sketchbooks. And that's not going to be a really complicated video. I just want to show some of my influences during the years and how I upgraded. This is the pile of my sketchbooks, and then we go to the first sketchbook with this first drawing. I think this is for 2015, and then you'll see a lot of anime. So this is from Code Geass, and Jack Frost. Yeah, basically all of my sketchbooks will be filled with a lot of series inspiration, cartoon and anime inspiration, and the reality is that I just started to make it a real business when I went into my high school years. So this first part is more about my lapses of creativity and the things that I liked at a young age. So you could see the main character of Rogue One and Cloud from Final Fantasy. Yeah, like of course Sasuke. Yeah, I did watch Naruto. I still like Naruto. I know, I'm sorry, but that's it. That's already the second or the third book, if I'm not wrong. Oh, the third book, which is an actual downgrade, literally. I don't know why I picked such a little book, such a small book, but after that the drawings start to become a little more original. I mean, at least in my style. These big old eyes and really round shaped characters. You can see in the first sketchbooks I didn't drew a lot. Actually, many pages were horrible, and I really enjoy this one. I love this drawing I put on the start of the sketchbook. And here you can see my style kept kinda chibi and a lot of superheroes, as I said. This was when the Daredevil series started on Netflix, and of course Overwatch, which was one of my most played games of all time. I really enjoy, to be realistic, I really enjoyed the art of Overwatch much more than the game, I think, but was still an amazing game. And then there we have, in another sketchbook, of course, a lot of Batman enemies, because Batman is my favorite superhero, and I probably will redo this drawing someday. And then more Overwatch. The next one or two sketchbooks will be filled with Overwatch drawings. And of course, at this time I was trying really hard to be a good artist and trying more face expressions. But, it still looked pretty lame. And then Tom Holland became Spider-Man. I did this red hat guy that looks like Ed Sheeran. I don't like Ed Sheeran, I'm sorry. But yeah, that was when I started to really expose my influences on some really detective stories and of course detective comics. But yeah, it was the start of my craziness. As you can see, I really enjoy DC Comics, Vertigo. I enjoy this drawing of Constantine. I think it's a cool chibi Constantine. An original character I did, and Riverdale. And drawings from South Park and Dragon Ball. I don't know why I did Kyle, because I really don't like South Park. And I actually, I don't know, it was... There's no explanation about that. Oh, Persona 5, and I love this game. And yeah, this was when I started to think I would like to be a character designer and concept artist. And I started to try to create my own characters. And I was also pretty obsessed with tattoos. So I started to draw tattoos to me and to other people. And as you could see, I also started watching JoJo, which is... You know JoJo, if you know JoJo. It's pretty good. This Batman, I enjoyed this Batman to this day. It was based on an artist that did the Batman universe and other heroes universe, of course, into the 50s, I guess. Daniel Medri, if I'm not wrong. And then we start to go into the high school. This was the moment I decided I really want to be an artist, which doesn't mean I start to get good at it. Just mean I was getting less bad. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but I start to try to improve my skills. I enjoy this character, the blue coat. I probably will draw him again one day. But yeah, I still didn't use the full potential of the sketchbooks. I used to rip off a lot of pages. Well, those were good years. This one character is, I think, a lot based on BioShock. Great game. And of course, this moon with a bullet or a rocket hitting it is a pretty famous movie. This was when I started doing some more complex Inktober arts. And you can see frogs. I did frogs like 1 week ago and probably 4 years ago too. And more animals. I started to really draw animals at this point. And the same year, I started to go really into JoJo. I started to go really into Berserk, which is my favorite anime and, to be honest, anime piece of all time. I love Berserk. Rest in peace, Muta. And there we have a maniac Mario. Some of these drawings I should redo them because they are good ideas. And I just skipped a lot of pages. As you can see, I left some good dust, which means I haven't touched in this stuff in a lot of time. We have Pokemon, superheroes, of course superheroes, dinos, which is kind of strange. I just entered into a dino phase for like 2 weeks. And then we went back to Japanese culture and, of course, superheroes. I enjoyed these drawings I did of Daredevil and the Wasp. And I'm pretty proud to this day. And then the Italian brothers, Mario and Luigi. If you can say it, I really enjoy Mario and Luigi. Backbone Prologue. It was a great game until they released the full game. Black Panther. That's when I tried to draw and Yordle for League of Legends. Yeah, that's when I started to play League. And this is one of my favorite drawings because it was based after, well, like one of my biggest inspirations in life, which is, and you will see soon because I'm gonna show it, Leonardo da Vinci. Yes, my name's Leonardo and I really enjoy Leonardo da Vinci. Pretty lame, I know. This is me in JoJo. I will redo this drawing. You can be sure about that. I will do it. It's still a good design to this day, I think. And it's based, of course, after my tattoo, which is based, of course, after the Gorilla song Feel Good Inc. More superheroes. And more character design. Oh, that's my literature teacher. I hate him. Don't tell anyone, okay? And well, this book was made before my last year in high school. So now we are going to start into a really dark period of my life. And for that reason, my next sketchbook was filled with colors, which is pretty dumb and ugly. But it wasn't one of my greatest moments in my life. Which, by the other hand, end up being some good drawings. I really enjoy like this Batgirl based on Sean Murphy White Knight. This is me trying to draw all the characters of League of Legends because I really wasn't given a shit to school. And yeah, you can see I started to draw a lot of knights, and I drew a lot more during my last year in high school. And this is me meeting Kim Jong-gi and Karl Kopinski and other artists I enjoy. I really got into Kim Jong-gi in my last year. And then more character design. I really love this character, this knight, and I just want to make him, but it's such a bad idea at the end, and I don't know. Half-Life. What can I say? Please, Half-Life 3, please. That's a really tall man. I'm just going through these pages because I really drew a lot, and I'm not gonna lie, I like the most part of these drawings, even though nowadays they look horrific, but they were good at the time. My cowboy animals, and yeah, that's it. And then finally I left high school and started to go in a art school, and I really got into basketball. I always loved basketball, but then I got really into basketball. I don't know why. And nowadays Lakers just make me sad, but that's for another video. Anyway, this first year in art school was mostly about anatomy and just gesture and figure drawings and perspective. So there's really nothing important in that one sketchbook. Now that's a really important one to me, because this was probably the worst period of my life, and at the same time one of the best periods of my life. You can see those are probably my best drawings in a sketchbook. Even That's My Dad, I Love You Dad, and George Harrison. Well, let's keep talking. That's probably one of my best pieces in a sketchbook, and Doctor Strange. But it was also the most depressing moment of my life. I had a huge breakdown, and I also studied nights, but I had a huge breakdown, and it was when I started to take my medication. And even though my drawings became less interesting, I think, in my opinion, of course, after that, so in the next sketchbook, it was the moment in my life where I truly changed and started to be happy and be more true to myself. And I think that really made me evolve, and made me be the consistent artist I am today, because I do really think I am consistent nowadays. But you can see some things never change. We have a lot of knights, we have superheroes, you could see Daredevil, and I enjoyed Star Wars. That's no big deal, everyone does. And if you don't, I'm not gonna say anything. And then this is the last sketchbook. I finished it, and at this point I was almost a year into my medication. And even though, as I said, those aren't my greatest drawings, I'm still really proud of them, because this is when I started to really get serious on this business. I started to draw really good knights and mechs, and I started to really put color in my life, which makes me really proud, even though I love to draw some dark stuff, like Dark Souls and this kind of stuff. But my life itself gained a lot of colors and a lot of happiness, and I'm really proud for that, and thankful to my family, my girlfriend, my friends, everyone that supported me. Some weapon design and knights. You can get away. There's just so many knights in this, and I really enjoyed this page. This is such a cute flower. I mean, it's not cute anymore, but her memory is still cute. I'm stuttering because it's kind of emotional. And then more knights. Yeah. This character in the left became and completed art in my Instagram. And then more Spider-Man. You can see I'm always trying to draw Spider-Man because for some reason it's my nemesis. I can do it. The webs in his suit are like hell to me. And then Alien Dude, which was a really important part of my life and a art therapy, to be honest. His story and the time I was doing his drawings and thinking about what I wanted to say with them were really important to me. And this was the last sketchbook I started to do, which doesn't have much thing, but does have some drawings of my sister. So shout out to Clara, and I know she's going to be a great artist if she wants to, of course. And I just wanted to show some of the early stuff she does, so that in the future you can see her progress.